I don't know why those words stay with me. I broke his trust, and lost myself too. Maybe because when I first heard her say them, she wasn't even talking to me. She was talking to the air, or to some ghost I couldn't see. And yet, in that quiet corner of the bookstore, it felt like she just handed me a secret I wasn't supposed to hold. The rain outside was hitting the glass in sheets, steady, relentless. I'd come in just to get dry, shaking my jacket out near the door, when I noticed her at the far table. 40, maybe 45. Dark hair swept back neatly, though one loose strand kept sliding forward when she tilted her head to read. A woman who looked like she'd been places, carried stories. She didn't look like someone waiting for company, she looked like she'd chosen to be alone. I told myself not to stare. But the way she moved, calm, deliberate, like she'd decided every gesture before she made it, had me caught. I grabbed the nearest book from the shelf just to give my hands something to do. Some dusty hardcover on philosophy. I didn't even read the title. When I turned, our eyes caught for half a second longer than they should have. Hers were steady, like she'd been expecting me. I felt my throat dry out. I looked away first, pretending to study the cover of the book in my hand. The silence of the store pressed in. A dripping umbrella leaned against the counter. The cashier had vanished to the back. And it was just the two of us, with the rain for company. I don't know what made me do it, but I drifted toward her table, not close enough to intrude, just close enough to feel her presence. She looked up again, this time with the faintest curve at her lips. Not a smile, not exactly. More like acknowledgement. "Do you ever choose books just by the weight of them?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was low, warm. I froze, then glanced at the book I was holding like a complete idiot. "Honestly? I didn't even check the title." That earned me the smallest laugh, soft and quick, like she hadn't used it in a while. I caught it, and held it somewhere inside me. We spoke a little, about nothing, really. She said something about always ending up in the philosophy aisle when she didn't know where else to go. I said I only came in to escape the rain. Neither of us admitted the truth, that maybe we were both looking for something else entirely. When she closed her book, her hand lingered on the cover, fingers tracing the spine as if it were a habit. A wedding ring? No. Her hands were bare. Strong, elegant. The kind of hands that had done real things in the world, not just flipped through pages. The conversation paused. She didn't rush to fill it, and neither did I. That silence felt charged, almost heavier than words. Finally, she stood, and for a moment I thought she'd leave. But instead, she brushed the loose strand of hair behind her ear and nodded slightly at me. "Stay dry," she said, like it was both casual and not casual at all. I watched her walk out into the rain, no umbrella, her coat pulling close around her frame. She moved like someone used to weathering storms, inside and out. And even now, hours later, I can't stop replaying the glance she gave me, steady, unflinching. Like she knew something about me I didn't even know yet. I didn't expect to see her again. That night in the bookstore had felt like one of those fleeting moments you tell yourself not to read into, something that drifts away as easily as rainwater down a gutter. But a week later, I walked into the repair shop where I worked, grease on my hands, the smell of burnt oil in the air, and there she was. Leaning against the counter, arms crossed, explaining something to my boss about her car. I froze mid-step, the rag slipping from my hand. Her hair was pinned back this time, strands catching the fluorescent light, and there was a firmness in her voice that made everyone listen. Not rude, not loud, just a quiet authority, like she'd had to carry herself this way for years. When my boss waved me over, I caught her eyes. For a second, I thought she'd pretend not to remember me. But she gave the smallest nod, like a shared secret. "The transmission," my boss muttered, handing me the paperwork. "She'll need it checked. Take care of it." So it was just the two of us, in the corner bay, her car sitting there with its hood propped open. She hovered nearby, close enough that I felt her presence but distant enough that I knew she wanted space. I tried to focus on the work, loosening bolts, checking lines, but my eyes kept drifting. Her hands rested on the edge of the workbench, fingers tapping against the wood without rhythm. Bare again. Not restless exactly, just distracted. You don't have to wait here, I said finally, without looking up. I know. She paused. But I'd rather. The way she said it was strange. Like waiting was easier than leaving. Minutes passed. The air smelled of rust and oil, heavy, filling the silence between us. I risked a glance at her. She wasn't watching me. Her gaze had drifted somewhere far off. And for the first time, she looked tired. Not the sharp, deliberate woman from the bookstore, but someone carrying something she didn't want to set down. You okay? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharper again, like a guard door slamming shut. I'm fine. Too quick. Too flat. I nodded, pretending I believed her, and bent back over the engine. But then it happened, a small crack in her armor. She let out this quiet laugh under her breath, half bitter, half weary. Sorry. I didn't mean to sound short. It's just been a long week. That laugh, it wasn't the soft one from the bookstore. It was raw, almost fragile. And I knew it wasn't the kind of thing she gave freely. I wanted to say something, to keep that honesty alive between us. But I stayed quiet, letting the sound of the wrench against metal fill the air. When I finally looked up, she was watching me. Not smiling, not frowning, just watching. Like maybe she was measuring how much of herself she could show me. The silence stretched again, thick, uneasy, but this time neither of us moved to break it. And then, almost too softly, she said, You remind me of someone I used to know. That line, delivered like a confession, lodged itself deep in me. I didn't ask who. I didn't dare. But I knew, right then, I'd be thinking about it long after she left. The third time I saw her wasn't planned. It never was. Rain hammered against the repair shop roof that evening, most of the crew already gone home. I was closing up, wiping down tools, when I heard the chime of the front door. She stepped in, umbrella dripping, jacket clinging to her shoulders. Sorry, she said, brushing water from her sleeve. I thought you'd still be open. I tried to play it off casual. Technically, we're not. But I'm here. What's wrong with the car? Not the car. She hesitated, eyes darting to the storm outside. Just. I didn't want to sit in it. Not tonight. There was something in the way she said it. A heaviness. Like the rain wasn't the only thing keeping her here. So I offered the only thing I could, a seat. We sat in the tiny break room, 2 mugs of stale coffee between us, the buzzing fluorescent light overhead. The storm outside rattled the windows, filling the silence when neither of us spoke. Her hair was damp, a few strands sticking to her cheek. I noticed how carefully she brushed them back, as though every movement mattered. Long day? I asked, keeping it simple. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something closer to exhaustion. Long week. Long year, if I'm honest. She stared at her coffee like it might hold the answers she couldn't say out loud. I wanted to ask more, to push past whatever wall she'd built. Instead, I let the moment hang, trying to respect the silence. But then she shifted, leaning slightly closer, elbows on the table. The space between us shrank, and suddenly I was too aware of how small the room was, how her perfume lingered faintly under the smell of grease and coffee. It felt like the kind of silence that begged to be broken. I shouldn't be here, she whispered, almost to herself. I swallowed hard. Then why are you? Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a second, just a second, it felt like she might actually tell me. The weight in her gaze, the half-parted lips, the quiet storm inside her, it all pressed against the edges of confession. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the table. The sound was sharp, slicing through the fragile air between us. She glanced at the screen, jaw tightening. A name flashed, one I didn't recognize. She silenced it without answering, but the moment was gone. She leaned back, the space between us returning, her guard snapping back into place. You're kind, she said finally, her voice steadier. Kinder than you should be. I didn't know what to do with that. My chest felt tight, words sitting heavy on my tongue. I wanted to tell her I noticed things, how she laughed when she was tired, how her hands trembled when she tried to hide it, how she always seemed to carry a storm inside even on the calmest days. But I didn't. I just nodded, forcing myself to stand, pretending to tidy the counter. Because if I stayed seated, if I kept looking at her like that, something would happen. Something neither of us was ready for. And yet, as she stood to leave, her sleeve brushed against mine. Barely a touch. Accidental, maybe? But enough to leave me rooted there, my hand tightening around the rag I held, wishing I hadn't let the silence win. The fourth time it happened, there were no excuses. No broken car. No rainstorm. Just us. She came by the shop late again, this time with a bag of takeout. "You shouldn't eat alone every night," she said, setting it down on the counter. I laughed it off, but she stayed. We ate in the quiet. Chopsticks clicking, the low hum of a radio in the background. Nothing out of place, except the way our silences stretched too long, the way our eyes caught and held too often. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. She put her food down halfway through, fingers tracing the rim of the carton. "This is strange, isn't it?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. They searched mine, waiting for me to break first. "Strange how?" I asked, pretending not to know. "This." She gestured between us. "Whatever this is." The words hung there, heavier than anything either of us had admitted before. My throat tightened. I wanted to say it wasn't strange, that it felt right in ways I couldn't explain. But the look in her eyes told me she wasn't asking for comfort. She was asking for the truth. I swallowed hard. "I don't know what we're doing." The silence after that felt like it could split the air in two. She leaned back, folding her arms, but it wasn't defense. It was weariness. Like carrying something she couldn't set down. Her gaze dropped to the table. "I'm too old for this." The words were quiet, almost broken. Not a declaration, more like a confession she didn't mean to say out loud. I leaned forward before I could stop myself. "Too old for what? For takeout? For company?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "For wanting something I shouldn't want." That undid me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every nerve in me screamed to ask what she meant, but the way her voice cracked on the word shouldn't told me enough. We sat there, two people on opposite ends of a table that suddenly felt too small, too intimate. My hand twitched against my thigh, aching to reach across the distance, but I didn't. Because once I did, there would be no undoing it. Her eyes finally lifted to mine, raw and unguarded. "This isn't normal," she whispered. "No," I agreed, my voice low. "But it feels like the only thing that is." She froze, breath catching, like I'd said the one thing she'd been trying not to admit to herself. Her lashes fluttered, her lips parted, but no words came out. We sat in that unbearable silence, both of us knowing something had shifted forever. Neither of us brave enough to call it what it was. And then, after what felt like an eternity, she said the line that's burned into me ever since. "If I don't stop this now, I don't think I'll ever be able to." After she said it, "If I don't stop this now, I don't think I'll ever be able to," we didn't see each other for a few days. I told myself I was fine with that. I buried myself in work, stayed late at the shop, even left my phone face down on the counter so I wouldn't keep checking it. But the silence clung to me. Then she showed up again. Not late, not flustered, not carrying takeout. Just standing there in the doorway, holding something in her hand. A photo. She placed it on the workbench without a word. It was an old picture, creased edges, colors slightly faded. A man, younger than her but older than me, leaning against a car. The kind of smile you don't fake. Her arm looped through his, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen yet. I couldn't look away. "That was 15 years ago," she said softly, pulling out a chair but not sitting in it. "His name was Daniel." The name alone carried weight, like she hadn't spoken it in years. I kept staring at the photo, afraid if I looked up I'd see her breaking. But her voice was calm, steady, like she'd rehearsed this 100 times and still didn't believe it herself. He loved cars. I used to follow him around to shops like this, watch him work, watch him lose track of time. She gave the faintest laugh, almost bitter. Sometimes, when you're bent over an engine, you remind me of him. The air in my chest collapsed. Not because she was comparing me to someone else, but because of the way her voice wavered on remind. What happened? I asked quietly. She finally sat down, hands clasped so tight her knuckles whitened. He died. Accident on the highway. I was 30. I thought I'd grow old with him. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away again. And then you walk in, 20 years later, and suddenly it feels like I'm being pulled back into a life I already lost. The room was too still. The hum of the shop lights, the faint tick of a cooling engine, even the dust in the air, it all pressed against me. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words lodged in my throat. All I could do was reach toward the photo, trace the outline of her smile with my finger, and whisper, "I'm not him." I know. Her voice cracked on those 2 words. But then she looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since she walked in, and there was something raw in her eyes, something between grief and recognition. "I know," she repeated, softer this time. "But that might be exactly why it scares me more." And just like that, everything shifted. She stayed in the chair longer than I thought she would. The photo lay between us like a fragile piece of glass neither of us dared to move. For a while neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty though. It was charged, alive, like the air before a storm breaks. I kept waiting for her to stand, to gather her things, to disappear again. But she didn't. Her fingers, still laced tightly together, trembled just slightly. I noticed it before she did, and before I could stop myself, I reached across the table. Not all the way. Just close enough that my hand rested near hers. Close enough that if she wanted to, she could close the space. She glanced at it, then at me. For a second, I thought she might pull back into her shell, retreat to that distance she guarded so well. But instead, she released one hand from its grip and let it fall gently over mine. Her palm was warm, her touch steady. Not desperate. Not rushed. Just steady. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter," she said quietly. I swallowed, feeling the weight of her words press down into my chest. "Neither can I." We didn't look away this time. Her eyes lingered on mine, searching, cautious, but no longer hiding. And I knew, without either of us saying it, that something had broken open between us. Not romance. Not declarations. Something slower, deeper. A truth we had circled around for weeks, finally spoken in silence. She exhaled, as though letting go of years she'd been carrying. "It doesn't feel fair," she whispered. "Maybe it isn't about fair," I said. The corners of her mouth tilted upward, but not into a smile. More like she was testing the shape of hope. She leaned back slightly, her hands still covering mine, and for the first time, she didn't look like she was about to run. We stayed like that, no words, no plans, no promises. Just 2 people who'd finally stopped fighting whatever this was. The small things filled the moment, the faint hum of the fridge in the corner, the low tick of the clock on the wall, the sound of her breathing syncing unconsciously with mine. Then she did something that caught me completely off guard. She leaned forward, not fully, not enough for lips, but enough that her forehead brushed against mine. A brief, fragile contact. The kind that could be mistaken for accident, except we both knew it wasn't. My eyes closed without thinking, and I let the weight of it sink into me. That closeness. That surrender. That unspoken choice. We didn't move for a long time. And in that quiet, I realized there would be no going back. It's strange, looking back now. When I first met her, I thought she was untouchable. Not because of her age, or the difference between us, but because she carried herself like someone who had already survived too much to let anyone close again. And maybe that's why I was drawn in. Not to fix her, not to rescue her, but because she made me see parts of myself I had never faced. She taught me silence could be louder than words. That the pauses between sentences carried more weight than anything rehearsed. That sometimes, the smallest gestures, a hand brushing mine, her laugh cutting through the quiet, the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching, could unravel a person more than any confession. I thought I was the one risking everything. But now I realize she was. She had more to lose. A life already built, walls already raised, scars already mapped across her heart. And still, she let me in. Not all the way. Not in the storybook sense. But enough. Enough that I carry her with me, even now. I don't know if what we had was right. Maybe it was never meant to last. But it changed me. It taught me that love isn't about declarations or grand gestures. It's about choosing, quietly, in the moments when no one's watching. She showed me what it means to be seen, fully. And in the process, I saw her too. Not the polished version the world expected, but the tired, guarded, vulnerable woman who still believed, against her better judgment, that closeness was worth the risk. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself replaying those small moments. The way her hand lingered on mine. The weight of her forehead resting against me. The silence that spoke louder than anything else could. And I realize, I didn't just break his trust. I broke hers. And maybe in the process, I lost pieces of myself too. But what remained, what we created in that fragile space, will stay with me. Always. Love doesn't always look like forever. Sometimes it looks like a quiet room, two people sitting close, choosing, for once, not to run. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?